James.
Yeah, he can make decisions if he wants.
You don't have to pinch yourself. This isn't a dream. Kahit itanong nyo pa sa kapitbahay, the NBA is definitely back. We thought it would never come, but here we are. We're back to waking up early just to catch the games live with crispy bacon on the side. The NBA has clearly become the barometer for all the other leagues on how to successfully organize a restart. Everything was planned right down to the littlest bubble. After over 100 days since the NBA suspended the season, teams finally competed in actual games over the weekend.
And the NBA is back. So much fun to have NBA basketball back. And the finish.
Including some title favorites. But how's the quality of the action? Same as before? Strange? Surreal? An early assessment of the NBA restart is the headline on tonight's Sports Page.
The hottest headlines.
The integral issue.
Who will join the pantheon of the great?
What's the outlook of the future of sports?
The game changers.
The history makers.
Stories that make sports eternally compelling.
Open the Sports Page.
Okay, it's tip-off time once again here on Sports Page. Hello, everybody. I'm Seb Sarmenta. In case you have been sleeping or hiding under a rock, you didn't find out that the NBA is back and definitely back with a huge bang. With me in the studio over there is attorney Charlie Cuna, and we have some NBA veterans with us in our show tonight.
That's right, Sev. Joining us today are our special guests, the coach of the Morocco Bolts in the PBA, Coach Norman Black, and a professional scout for the Dallas Mavericks, Mr. Jim Kelly, who knows a little something about the PBA as well. And so we'll get it going right now. You can do the ceremonial toss, Mr. Sev Sarmenta.
Okay, because these two guys I have worked with and I have played basketball with Jim Kelly, but that's a different story altogether. We were reminiscing on that. Coach Norman, we'll begin with you. You are an NBA veteran. You worked briefly also with the Toronto Raptors. What's happening in the bubble? What are your impressions of what the NBA has done so far, trying to get its league back and starting again?
Well, I'm very impressed with what I've seen so far. It seems to be very well organized, and if you watch the games, you can see on the court, it's actually very interesting the way they set up the court with the fans in the background and the fact that the players are being social distance from one another and the coach. And I've been very impressed with it. I mean, it's something where it's almost an ideal situation for the coach because finally he has the undivided attention of the players because they're probably eating together, living in the same hotel.
You saw when you were with the Toronto Raptors, I know Jim Kelly helped you get over there, and you were part of the training camp. Is this similar to a training camp scenario over there in the NBA right now?
It's a little bit different. It would only be maybe similar for those who are trying out for the team who don't live in Toronto and had to probably live in a hotel with the other players who were trying out. Otherwise, the majority of the Toronto players have their own homes, so they're going back and forth and they're staying with their families every day. This is a little bit different. This is almost like you're playing AAU ball when you were in high school, coming out of high school, or if it's almost like you're in the Olympics or the World Championships, where you're probably staying in the same hotel, on the same floor, eating the same food every day. So you're seeing each other on a regular basis.
Okay, let's go to Jim Kelly, who's right now in San Diego, in the States. Your impression so far, Jim?
No question so far, Seb, but I have been impressed with the quality of play. You know, teams had 4+ months off, but the players came back in what I would say better than expected shape. Scrimmages last week were a little rough around the edges, but you know, the games, the first 2 days, very impressive. First 3 days, I should say. Good level of conditioning, and I think the players are going to need that because they're going to be playing every other day, probably until the end of August.
Well, being
Charlie?
a scout, yes, thanks a lot, Sev. Jim, being a scout, obviously you like to look at player tendencies and how the players execute the plays and all of that. Have you seen them so far the way you want to look at them, or has it been really rusty and not the usual type of play that you'd expect from NBA level players?
No, I've been pleasantly surprised. You know, the shooting has been pretty good. I thought the conditioning would come into play, but I haven't seen any bad conditioning so far. I do think that'll be a challenge for the teams, like I mentioned before, because they have to play every other day. And, you know, when you start this let's call it this bubble experience here. We start the whole league off. Everyone's very excited, but it's going to get to be a pretty much of a grind as we go forward there. Especially the playoffs come up on the, I believe it's the 15th or 16th. Depends if there's a play-in game. But I think the players have done very well for themselves.
Well,
Okay, go ahead, Charlie.
yeah, well, I was going to ask Jim also, because obviously you've been keeping in touch with some of your Dallas Mavericks team officials and coaches. After playing one game already, your team has played one game. What are they saying? Anything about how the players are coping so far inside that bubble?
Well, we have about 3 or 4 conference or Zoom calls a week, and we usually talk to somebody on the team, be it the coach or one of the general managers. And the camaraderie is very commendable. This is not your typical NBA situation. As Norman said, in an NBA setting, when you have a camp, the last several years have been much more confined to the team's practice facilities, because training is a little bit less. It's only about a week. And it didn't make very much sense to leave your home base there. But for this purpose here, the players train together, they live together. When they have off hours, they're together. And the esprit de corps on the team has been excellent. I think that's been a big plus for the team. And I think it's really not a natural experience for NBA players, because you're usually always going somewhere. I mean, even in a preseason, you're getting on a plane or you're going in a bus, but you're in one place for a considerable amount of time and you're with the same people. So I think it's a very good experience for them.
Okay, let's get into a little technical basketball talk here. Coach Norman, some of the games, there was a concern about players being hesitant to play the usual kind of defense. But earlier today, Toronto put the handcuffs on the Lakers and they shot the lights out. What's your assessment of the quality of play so far?
Well, even in the Lakers-Clippers game, you could see the defense that the Lakers played in the last few minutes to win that basketball. I think the fact that everybody knows if you're in that bubble that you're being tested on a consistent basis every day, just because of that fact, guys will go out and be aggressive. They think they're safe. They think everybody around them is safe. They don't have the coronavirus. So they're just going to go out and play basketball. And because there are no fans there, if you notice, the players are actually the fans. So, there's a situation where a lot of ego comes into play. You can see a lot of yapping going on out there, almost as though you're on the playground, playing in the playground and playing for pride. So I expect these guys to come out and play hard. Like Jim said, I've been very impressed so far with the games.
There's news that the players who are not playing actually are part of the audience. They end up watching the games of the other teams. Charlie, final question before we go into our first break.
Yeah, well, I'd like to ask, we talked about the rust that some of the players might have. Coach Jim said not too much that he's seen so far. But how about the rust on the referee side? How have the calls been so far, as far as you've seen?
I don't think Jim can comment. Okay, go ahead, Jim.
Well, there's always rust on the referees. I mean, they always can be better. Let's say that. They always can be better. But, they're in the bubble as well. They're training in the bubble. When we had the scrimmage games, they were rotating in the bubble. So, in fact, they're professionals. They're just like the players. I mean, they're out there working on their game just as the players are. So I would hope they would get better as we get forward. The one interesting thing is there's really no fan pressure. Usually when you're at a home court and the home team is behind, you would hear it from the fans and they'd be all over the referees. And this is a rare situation where the referees are going to hear it just from both teams, and that's going to be about all. So it's a little bit unique in that regard.
And Coach Norman, there's no home court advantage in this particular setting. So the star players supposedly of a home team might not get a few breaks from the officials here.
Well, I honestly think the players will have to make an adjustment because there are no fans. There's nobody yelling. It's not really noisy in the gym. So everything you say will be heard. So if you say something you think behind the back of the referee, he probably can hear that. Or if you're yapping at another player, he's going to be able to hear all of that noise, and he's going to be on top of that. So the players are going to have to adjust a little bit on how they talk to the referees, maybe be a little bit nicer so the referees don't call technicals on them, and also how they interact with the other players on the other teams, because I'm sure the referees will want to control the game as much as possible.
So the players will say, "Excuse me, Mr. Referee, may I?"
Like that. That might be too.
Okay. Okay, we'll take our first break, but when we return, so many other dimensions, issues, concerns about this NBA bubble and its return so far. When we return to Sports Page, we'll take our first break.
NBA is now on Signal TV and TV5. Catch the live games every day on NBA TV Philippines, weekends on TV5, and Mondays and Fridays on One Sports.
How in the world can you know where you're going if you don't know the past and the history?
Against all odds, beauty emerges. Kings return.
Everyone is always dreaming, which is all good and well, but at some point there has to be action.
As a familiar light shines on this stage, remember there's more on the other side. We're with you every step of the way.
You better think again.
Together,
Part of something way bigger.
we return.
Welcome back to Sports Page. Will your favorite team go all the way to take home the NBA title? Well, Las Vegas' Caesars Sportsbook recently released the title odds of all the teams in the bubble. Let's find out who made it in the top 5 on Sidebar. Feels like it's title or bust for the Los Angeles Lakers, as they have the biggest shot at winning the crown at 35.7%. The Milwaukee Bucks have held the best record for nearly the whole season, and the odds are also in their favor at 27.6%. Lurking closely are the Los Angeles Clippers at 23.5%, and Kawhi Leonard does not want to relinquish the title for sure. His former team, the defending champions Toronto Raptors, are far behind at number 4, but they have surprised many this season. And lastly, rounding out the top 5 are the Denver Nuggets, whose young and tall roster can really pose matchup problems this season. Speaking of statistics, COVID-19 cases continue to rise at an alarming rate in Florida, where the NBA bubble is located. As of yesterday, the number is already at 480,000. The NBA recorded 0 cases in its last 2 tests. Truly really commendable, but surely the league doesn't want to be too complacent, especially with the players sacrificing a lot by being in the bubble. The recent developments in Florida do not escape NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, who already expressed his concerns last month. And it looks like his worries aren't going away anytime soon, as he recently spoke to reporters about the possibility of the virus bursting the bubble.
It's not an exact science because nobody's ever done this before. And I think we have plans in place where we might pause, similar to what baseball is doing now. Probably if we had any significant spread at all, we'd immediately stop. And one thing we do is try to track those cases to determine where they're coming from and whether there had been spread on the campus. I would say ultimately we would cease completely if we saw that this was spreading around the campus and something more than an isolated case was happening.
Well, that was a sidebar. And I'd like to ask Coach Jim, what do you think would be the number of persons who would have had to contract COVID before the NBA stops it all again?
Well, there's contingency plans there. If a team loses a player due to COVID, you can replace him. You can't replace a player due to injury. So, but I do know they have plans in place. You can replace players if you get an isolated player here or there, so that your team can at least have another player or another body in there, so that you're not going into the game with less players. So that is taken care of there. But I don't think they have a set number of what would cause a team to shut down.
Okay. Okay, Coach Norman Black, what is your take and your view about how the NBA has presented itself over the last 2 days, especially with regards to the social issues that are happening in the United States right now, especially with regards to race?
Well, my personal view is that I don't expect everybody to understand because everybody's not a Black American and they haven't had the experiences that Black Americans go through as they go through life in the United States. I know personally, you always have certain fears when you're growing up, particularly when you're in your car, when you're driving. You're always worried about being pulled over and what might happen if you do get pulled over, or if you are approached by a policeman, things of those natures. Of course, the other situations they're talking about with the racism, that's something that we have had to deal with our entire lives. That's just a fact. It's not something that I'm putting out there as an excuse or making it up. It's really a fact. I've gone through it in my lifetime, particularly when I was growing up in the United States. What I see right now is that there's a little bit of momentum where people are actually thinking about it now. They're talking about it. And the Black Lives Movement and the people who support it really want to see that move forward. They don't want it to be stopped because nobody's talking about it anymore, or there's not another George Floyd situation. So you can see where the players in the NBA have actually been very active in talking about it and trying to really push the cause. And I think that's a good thing. And it's hard, Seb. I mean, when you talk about racism, it's always a sensitive subject. And of course, if you're not really subjected to it, it's hard for you to understand. It's as simple as that. I mean, if you've gone through it your entire life, then you can feel the feeling, and it's not a good feeling.
Okay. I'm going to ask a question to the two gentlemen. Here we are in this bubble, and these are grown men, millionaires coming together. Protocols are always on the line when all the boys are together. Is something bound to happen here in terms of somebody's being mischievous, somebody will break the protocol, get out of the bubble, escape? Is anything like that bound to happen in a situation like this? Let's start with Jim.
I don't know if it's bound to happen. I think it could happen. I think it especially could happen as we get closer to, let's say, the 15th, when a team could be eliminated. Maybe someone's going to let down their guard and they say, well, what's the difference if I get caught going out or not? Because we're not going to make the playoffs anyway. But I think the league has done a good job of become partners with the players, not only with their social statements, but also say, if one or two players go out and they break this bubble or this atmosphere we have, you have a chance to bring the whole thing down, which would affect every player and every team in the league. So there is a little bit of, collective group conscious here. And I think for the most part, I think the players are pretty happy there. They have enough activities. If you've ever been to Disney World, it's almost like a little city in itself there, where they're staying. Teams that I think get past the end of August, your family can come in. There's going to be some guests could come in. So I think it's a good chance it's going to succeed. Is it 100%? No, but there's always an outlier here or there, but I hope not.
Coach Norman, from a coaching standpoint, managing players, managing men, how difficult, or because of what Jim said also, everybody helping out each other, actually?
Well, the good thing that the teams have going for them is that the majority of these players, they've been playing basketball their entire lives, and being part of a team is all about discipline and sacrifice. I mean, if you're going to be on a winning team, normally that comes into play somewhere down the line. So this is a situation where you don't want to be that person who breaks the protocol and you're the person that busts the bubble and has the whole thing falling down or coming down. So you're going to have to be disciplined at this particular time. You're going to have to be sacrifice for your teammates, sacrifice for the league, for this to work. I mean, let's hope and pray that we do get a vaccine for the coronavirus in one day.
Charlie, one question before we go into our next break.
Yeah, well, Coach Norman, We talked about all the camaraderie that they have over there. They're playing pool together and watching movies and listening to DJs together. Do you think anyone's going to actually use the snitch hotline to tell on another player who's violated protocol? How often do you think that's going to happen?
No. I don't think that's going to happen. At least I hope it doesn't happen. You don't want anybody snitching on each other. But at the same time, I will say this. The teams that get along better will probably be the teams that'll win. The teams that don't really get along well will probably be the teams that get eliminated first, because you're around each other every day. So at some point, you're either going to like each other or you're not going to like each other. It's going to come down to that. So that would be my feeling.
All right, well, we'll see what's going to happen, as the players keep moving forward, playing these games in that bubble. Coming up next here on Sports Page, of course, the debates continue about the NBA awards, which will be handed out during the playoffs. So who do you think should win as most improved player? Well, we'll find out when we return. For tonight's That's What They Said, we asked you who should win the Most Improved Player Award in the NBA this season. And Russell Jan Rojas said, Bam Adebayo. Since nung nawala si Hassan Whiteside sa Miami, umangat numbers niya at saka he's starting to hit his potential. Si Kim Rimpola naman, Brandon Ingram, the new All-Star. And Cyrus Reyes said, Jason Tatum, laki nang in-improve sa offense at defense. And Sirona Ramon John said it should be Seth Curry. He's been a consistent performer off the bench as well as a very productive shooting guard for Luka. Spreads the floor well, has high percentage with his shooting. Ayan. So that's what they said. We talked about earlier the physical aspect. Coach Jim said that the conditioning seems to be okay physically. They've been running up and down the court. How about the mental aspect, Coach Jim? Are the players, some of them might be still apprehensive about playing. You talked about the lack of defense in the Houston-Dallas ball game, practicing social distancing on the defensive end. Is that a mental thing that's going on probably?
No, that was somewhat in jest there. That's more of the style of play of Houston, and we sort of matched that style of play with them, and we challenged them to score as much as you can. But I think if the players are socially busy, they have something to do on their day off, they're not just hanging around their rooms. And so far, they've had a lot of different activities they could do. And I believe this week, there's like 3 campuses there. And I think starting this week, you can go from one campus to another campus. And there might be some activities at another campus that is not on your own, or campus being your hotel area there. I think if you can stay active, you're not just sitting around a hotel watching TV, I think you can stay reasonably sharp, especially when I think all teams are motivated in the early rounds of the playoff here. I think as we get closer to the 15th, there'll be several teams that are going to be eliminated. And I think the chance for those to play could get a little sloppy.
And I heard from the announcer earlier that his golf game is getting better and better during this bubble. Coach Norman, who do you think are the front runners for the NBA title this year?
Well, going back to that question real quick about the most improved, we forgot about Luka, Coach Jim Kelly's player. I mean, he's probably had the greatest increase in statistics of any player in the league this year. Going back to your question now, I think the Bucks versus the Lakers would probably be the 2 teams that I think would make it to the finals. I would prefer to see Boston, but after watching them against the Bucks just yesterday, I'm not sure if they have the big men to be able to compete with Milwaukee. At the same time, even though I'm picking the Lakers, the fact that Sweet Lou and Harrell, the big guy, Montreal, for the Clippers aren't playing right now, but yet they really gave the Lakers a run the other day. So when those 2 guys come back, I think the Clippers are going to give the Lakers a run. But right now, I would go for the Bucks and the Lakers.
Okay. Just very quickly now, Coach Norman, what are the most significant things we have learned from the bubble that we can apply for the PBA?
Well, this is just my opinion. Obviously, the NBA has spent a lot of money on the bubble. because you're keeping everybody in one place. But that seems to be the best way to do it, at least up to now. I mean, it's been proven to be the best way to do it, especially if you look at Major League Baseball and what's happening there with them doing all the traveling and a lot of their players are testing positive for the virus. So I think they've done a great job of just keeping everybody disciplined within the bubble. Like the commissioner said, you never know what's going to happen in the future, so you have to be prepared and be reactive to anything that might happen. But so far, so good.
Charlie?
Well, I'd like to ask Coach Jim, are there any aspects in this bubble situation that you think the NBA can still improve on, despite all the success so far in the past few days?
I think they've improved the court a little bit in the last 2 or 3 days. You know, players are used to the crowd sitting around the sidelines of the court, and they sort of get their feel from where they are there. And I think there were a lot of players stepping on sidelines. And I think if you noticed the last 2 days, they made the sideline a little bit thicker and a little bit more noticeable there. I think that's one thing I think they helped themselves with. Other than that, I think the teams would like to get into those main courts a little bit earlier and maybe shoot around. As it is right now, you get to that court maybe a half hour before you play, and then as soon as you're done, you're off that court, and you have a practice place you can go to, but you never can go back to that court again. There are no practicing on the main court there. I think if that works itself out, and it's probably logistics and so many teams, if that works itself out, I think the teams probably be a little bit happier there.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, and we still have a lot of games in our own TV schedule across our different platforms, Charlie, and so many games to look forward to, actually.
That's right. There are some games still on tap this week, including tomorrow's matchup between the LA Lakers and the Utah Jazz. That's at 9 a.m. And again, you can watch the NBA live every day on NBA TV Philippines on Signal, every Monday and Friday here on One Sports, and weekends on TV5. With all those options, there's really no reason to miss the NBA. So, of course, we'd like to thank our guests today. Coach Jim Kelly from the Dallas Mavericks, thank you for coming on the show. Coach Norman Black, of course, as usual. I'm going to turn it right back to Sev Sarmiento for the last look on this edition of Sports Page.
Oh, yes, we've had a great show with these two gentlemen. Always good to see them both. There's nothing like basketball to energize our lives here in the Philippines. And the NBA's return is most welcome, coming at a time when we need it the most. And it could be the blueprint for other leagues in the future, even our very own PBA. And as strange it may seem, it's still basketball. It's different this time. No crowds, a little less noise, but, you know, it's the NBA after all. And during this difficult chapter of our lives, the NBA's return is definitely most welcome. In behalf of Attorney Charlie Cuna in the studio, Coach Norman Black and Jim Kelly over there in the United States, thank you for joining us. We bring to a close this edition of Sports Page.